For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future. Hey, we are Managing Your Financial Future. Welcome back. Another episode as we slowly wind down season 12, 13, 15. I'm not sure what it is. I'm your podcast host, Johnny Dean, back here with my good friend, Professor Rick Plum. Missed you last week.
Sorry, some things come up.
I know that. But we had.
But I heard Ara did okay.
He did great.
Yeah.
He did great, and it was a lot of fun. I was telling him that when you get people who are just advisor types, they like to sit and do the numbers and sit behind the desk and talk to people.
Right.
They
like to do their job.
You put a microphone in front of them, they start to get a little scared. But boy, he was on.
Oh, he's not the shy type.
No, he wasn't the shy type. So we're going to, as I said, get some more advisors here. We've already done that this season, and we'll do it again next season. But in the meantime, I've got Professor Rick Plum here, and I do appreciate that. Rick is a certified financial planner professional, a CFP. And I am the non-advisor type. I should always mention that. But it's nice to have an advisor hanging around. And as I've learned via osmosis over the 30-plus years that we've been doing this. And so it's nice to have some knowledge about this. And so if you folks want to listen to our podcast, it's good because you can pick it up as well. And I think just based on the emails we get from people, they are understanding this stuff. And we get suggested topics a lot from people. And I don't get to all of them, but I get to some of them. And one in particular, this was about a month ago, asked about how do you know how much money you're going to need to retire? Is there a way? Is there a way to figure this out so that you can say, because people get
well, how do you plan
nervous
for retirement when you don't know what you need in retirement? So kind of figuring out what you need in retirement is step one to figuring out how to plan for retirement.
Exactly. And I can see that. I mean, the rule, you can look it up online, and there are rules of thumb.
Right.
Well, if you can replace 70% of your pre-retirement income, but then, it gets into other topics too, because, well, okay, if I can replace 70, but where's that income going to come from?
Where's the cash flow going to come from? Cash flow is king. And how you go about doing it depends on how far ahead of retirement you're planning. Obviously, if you're in your 20s, you're making some very broad assumptions that you even have a clue what retirement.
Right.
Yeah.
I
mean, come on. I mean, when we were 20, we didn't think too much about what we'd be doing in retirement. I remember when I first got in the industry thinking about retirement back when I was in my 30s and late 20s and early 30s, and thinking, well, I'm just going to work off if I need X amount of dollars, and I'm not even going to count Social Security because I didn't think it was going to be there when I got there.
That's what they tell everybody. Yeah. So it's not going to be there.
Yeah. And so you work towards it and you make certain assumptions, and then life changes and you have to redo your assumptions. But so the further away you are, the more broad and general everything's going to be. The answer to how do you plan for retirement when you're 20s and 30s is save as much as you can.
Yeah.
If as long as you're doing that, then the rest will come out in the wash, kind of, so to speak. But you just have to build a portfolio, and building that discipline of creating the savings and ongoing things is going to be your best benefit, your best course of action. What it turns into is what it's going to turn into, but you really don't have a lot of control of what your retirement looks like, because you don't even know what tomorrow looks like. Are you going to have another kid that's going to cost you, an arm and a leg? What's it? If you are young, do you have kids? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to go to trade school? Are they going to, what's it going to cost you to raise the kid? That's what your first focus is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, saving for retirement, where you can also potentially do some education savings, Roth IRAs, things like that, where I can access the money for education if I have to. And hopefully they're smart enough or athletic enough or skilled enough in something else that they get scholarships and I don't have to access it.
Wouldn't that be nice? But don't plan on that. Assume that's not going to happen. And if it does, it's extra.
It's a little windfall. But that's why saving in a Roth and things of that nature makes sense, because if they don't need it, hey, it's yours for retirement.
I heard, I talked to a friend of mine, this is a number of years ago, who was a pilot, and we were joking around. And I had said, well, is piloting hard? I mean, when you fly from Los Angeles to New York, is it hard? Is it easy? What? And he says, well, once you get up in the air, he says, once you get going, if I'm flying from LA to New York, I mean, when it comes right down to it, you just point the airplane toward New York. I mean, he said, really?
Right, but that's not the whole thing of the pilot. That's not what everything I want the pilot to do. Most of what the pilot is doing is the same thing over and over again. But I also want them to be able to turn into Sully if that happens.
Well, that is true.
And
yes.
Most of those guys, I'm sure all of them are that or should be that good. But they hopefully will never have to use that skill. Well, but they have it, and I sure as heck want them to have it.
Well, but they're trained to do that. But you see, you point it in that direction. Now, as you fly along, there may be you may have to go around a storm. You may have to deviate, but you're generally getting there. You got 5 hours to get there. So, little deviations. But I started thinking about this, and I thought, well, as you get closer, it starts to become a little bit more critical.
Right.
You can't make too many more deviations.
When you leave LAX, you're going in the general direction of New York.
Correct.
But when you're getting closer, are you going to LaGuardia? Are you going to JFK? Are you going to Newark? You got to get down to specifics and go right way.
Exactly. Do you see where I'm going with this sort of in retirement? And it becomes more critical. And you can make there's less room for error.
If there's a storm over the Midwest somewhere, and you're just coming out of California going to New York, you can make a sweeping change.
You can go around.
When you get closer, you don't have that much time to change. You don't have that much. You have much more small adjustments are much more necessary. With the long shot, you got big adjustments. They'll get you there. But once you get to little things matter when you get close to the destination. The destination being retirement, John is thinking of.
That's it. If you haven't picked that up by now. I'm not a pilot, obviously, so I'm sure pilots are saying, come on, there's way more to it than that. But this is just for illustrative purposes only. You know what I'm talking about. Same thing with retirement. So the mistakes become magnified and more critical the closer you get to it. So the idea is planning.
Right.
In this case.
And so as you get closer to retirement, where you can start seeing what your expenses look like, you have your house, maybe if that's the house you're going to live in for the rest of the time. Are you going to downsize? Unfortunately, are you going to upsize? Some people do that as they get closer to retirement. You're getting a better feel for what your expenses are going to be. But now you've got to figure out, okay, I know kind of what my expenses might look like. Where's the cash flow going to come from to cover that expense?
And that's exactly the way it is. As you're a long way from retirement, you really don't know what your expenses are going to be.
No, not for retirement.
No, if you're 25 years out, 30 years out.
40 is old, and we're talking about once you get to 60.
That's true. But as you get closer, you start to develop a sense of how much you're probably going to need. If you're 4 or 5 years out, you have a pretty good idea. So part of deciding how much you're going to need to retire it involves, Professor Plum, I guess, knowing how much you are going to need on a monthly, yearly basis.
Need is the first thing you have to focus on. What do I need? What do I have to have? What do I have to have, and what do I want?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to have a certain level to meet the bills that I'm going to be carrying into retirement, whether there's a mortgage or no mortgage, rent, property taxes, insurance, basic food, heating and, electricity and things those are your basic. And then there's the things, well, I'd like to be able to visit the grandkids. I'd like to be able to travel. Travel can be defined as, going out to the local state park and enjoying, the scenery there, or, getting a motorhome, cruising across the country, or international travel. There's multiple levels of travel, and they all have different expenses. So figuring out what you're going to spend.
But would you advise people when they're trying to figure out, well, can I retire 5 years from now? Would you advise them to say, well, what are your bills now? What do you need to spend now?
What bills are going to go away, if any, when you retire? What new expenses are going to come into play when you retire, if any?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get an idea of what you're going to spend. So there's two ways to look at it. You either look at it from a spending aspect. I'm going to want to spend X amount of dollars per month. Or you look at it the other side and say, I'm 4 or 5 years out from retirement. My nest egg is X. My 401k, my IRAs, my investment portfolio is X. And my Social Security and or pensions are going to be Y. So I need to be able to withdraw, or I'm looking at how much can I withdraw from the portfolio. So all told, given these income sources and this portfolio, I can have X amount of dollars per year. Can I afford to live forget where it's going. I don't even know where it's going. I can make, I'm going to have 100,000 a year in retirement.
Yeah.
Well, I'm making 90,000 now. I'm definitely going to be able to retire. Or I'm making 200 now. Well, that's a different income level. What's going on? What am I going to have to adjust in retirement? So you either look at it from, here's my income and I will adjust to that, or here are my expenses. How do I cover that? And then look at, if from a planning standpoint, I think that one's a little bit easier to deal with, or
Which one?
A little more precise. Here's my expenses, expected expenses. How do I cover it? Because now I'm looking to, if I can calculate a number. I need 40, and this is where, the rules of thumb come into play. 4% rule, if you want to look at that. I've got my Social Security, got my pension, and I need $40,000 more. Okay, I need $1 million in retirement, give or take. Depends on when you're going to retire too. Am I retiring at 55 or am I retiring at 75?
Well, let's say somebody's 60 and they want to retire at 65.
So I need roughly $1 million when I retire. How close am I? I've got $750 in my 401k now. I'm saving X amount of dollars per month. My match from the 401k is Y. Do I need to pick up the pace? Do I need to be more aggressive to try to hopefully get to where I want to go? Or am I on track and I can actually start doing what's prudent and pulling back a little of the aggressiveness as I get closer, so that a detrimental market the year before I retire doesn't take my ability to retire away from me? I don't want to ever put the market in the position of making my retirement decision for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, I need my $1 million. I've got, 950,000. I've got another year. I'm going to save maximum 401k contribution this year, $30,000. So I should be doing pretty good. I'm going to stay invested. And then a 2008, 2009 happens. 2000 to 2002 happens. And my 950, instead of growing to $1 million with that extra 30,000 in it, drops to $700,000. Now I can't afford to retire. Am I in a position to even to continue working? Or is my job going away?
That's like poor planning there.
That is poor planning. But unfortunately, a lot of people will do that, and they don't think about reallocating towards their goal until they get to retirement.
All right. So if you look and you say, okay, I know when I retire in 5 years, I'll very likely have about $100,000 a year of expenses.
Right.
And I say, okay, well, I have X amount coming in Social Security. Maybe I have a pension here. So I look at this and I say, between pensions and Social Security, I've got about $60,000 coming in between me and my spouse.
Right.
So I need another $40,000 to cover this $100,000 nut that I've got to cover. So I say, well, I need $40,000 a year. And this is what I'm just kind of repeating what you're saying. I need an extra $40,000 a year.
So my portfolio should be around $1 million.
Which is saying 4% of $1 million is
very
$40,000.
Generic, very broad based. I mean, now we can get into the weeds on this and say, well, I need $100,000, but 5 years into retirement, my mortgage of $2,500 a month goes away.
That's where the variables start. But can you retire? I just want to know, can I quit when I hit age 65? I'm 60, let's say. I want to know, can I quit when I'm 65?
That's where we take a look at what do you have going on? Because you may say, well, I need $40,000 to retire, but I only have $500,000 in my portfolio. And then say, well, there's no way I can retire at 65.
Yeah.
But then if my mortgage of $2,500 a month is going to go away 7 years into retirement, and my need now is only $10,000 from my portfolio, now it's a more reasonable thing. But if you only look at one point in time when you have changes, or you want to retire at 60, and you're saying, well, I need $100,000, and what is that? I need $2.5 million in my portfolio to get $100,000. Well, you're not considering the fact that your Social Security or pension is going to kick in a couple of years,
and maybe your mortgage will go away.
And maybe your mortgage. So you have to look at all these different things. But the idea is to at least start considering what you are spending.
How do I know if I can't retire?
If you have no money.
Well, I mean, I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, if I need
Well, I've seen people where we say, look, based on what you have said you want to achieve, you are not going to get there from here. Your goals are too lofty, and it's not fun. I don't have that discussion very often, but every once in a while I will have to have that discussion with somebody and say, you are expecting way too much from your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
You're spending $70,000 a year from a $500,000 portfolio. or you're spending $70,000 a year from a $300,000 portfolio. This is not going to last forever. It's going to go away. There's nothing you can do to make this last forever.
Other than cut your expenses.
Right. So either you start looking at cutting them now, or by definition, you're going to cut them later because you will not have the income.
So the first thing you got to do when trying to decide if you want to retire is calculate how much you're going to spend. How much do I need to spend likely at that time? And then find out, where is this money going to come from? Is most or all of it covered by Social Security and pensions, where this certain
sometimes it is
guarantees? Well, you may be okay. If not, then you've got to look at, well, how short am I with these with this guaranteed income?
And do
how
I
much
have to work longer? Working longer will let you save more, continue to save more, and it allows your Social Security to grow. If you work from 65 to 70, your Social Security grows quite a bit, and it gives you 5 more years of contributions, and it gives you 5 more years of potential growth.
Yeah, so there are ways to do this.
If you are in a position to be able to work those extra 5 years. Some people get to age 65 or somewhere out in that area, and they physically cannot do the demands of the job anymore, or the job is just not available. They can't do it. Pilots have to retire. You brought them up earlier. I think they still have to retire at 65.
I think it's 65. I could be wrong.
It used to be 60.
What about taxes? Have you seen people who have run all the numbers and they say, oh, good, I can make it. But they forget that some of this, for example, they've got a decent amount in their 401k, where they say, well, oh, okay, well, I've got, $500,000 in my 401k. I need $20,000 a year out of that. That's 4%. So I'll just take that, but not thinking about they're going to have to pay taxes on that, or maybe their Social Security will be reduced somewhat because of Medicare,
or taxes on Social Security.
Or taxes on Social Security.
They look at it.
How do you figure that? What do you do there?
Well, a lot of times what I've seen, and luckily what I've seen the majority of the time, are people overestimate how much they're going to need for taxes. They say, well, I need they say I need $100,000 a year. I look at the tax tables, and at $100,000 on the tax table, married couple, that's a 22% income tax bracket. So that means I'm going to spend $20,000 or so in taxes. That means I'm going to live off of 80. And I can afford to live off of 80. When in reality, the taxes are going to be a lot less than that. That's what. So luckily, people tend to overestimate taxes. Not everybody, but a lot of people that I've seen. Or you start talking to somebody, or you look at your own tax bill and say, look, my income right now is $100,000. How much am I paying in taxes on my current income? And get a kind of an estimate from there. But that is a little misleading. That might be a little overstated as well, depending upon how much money you're putting into your 401k and things of that nature, because that's not taxable. So it's a matter of either getting comfortable with taxes. Did I say that out loud?
No.
Or talking to somebody who is comfortable with taxes and saying, okay, you said you needed X amount of dollars per year, and that's spending that you know of. And one of the biggest expenses for a lot of people in retirement is the amount of taxes they're going to pay. And so now let's work in, if you're taking this much money from Social Security and this much from pensions, and right now 100% of your money's in tax deferred accounts, which is not all that uncommon, your tax bill is going to look like this number. So where you thought you needed 90, now you need 102,000 and change. So
you mean to remove the amount that you're going to have to take out of your portfolio?
You gross up the distribution to account for the taxation. Now, whether the taxes come from withholding on your pension, your withholding on Social Security, yes, you can do withholding on Social Security, or you do it from withholding from your IRAs or quarterly payments, however you want to make your tax payment. It's an expense. So we talked about estimating your expenses earlier. How much do you think you're going to spend? Well, one of those expenses that you're going to spend is taxes.
Yeah, I've heard people get trapped by that. Where they said, I need this $20,000 a year, and I thought I would do it because that's, maybe 5-6%, a little rich. But
I need more than
that. I forgot that I got to gross that up for taxes.
Right. I mean, that $20,000 per year may cost $4,000 in taxes, even though they're in the 12% income tax bracket.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, how did that happen? 12% of $4,000 is how much? Or $20,000. It's not $4,000, Rick. Well, it could be because you're in the zone where that money, that $20,000 of distribution from the IRA through $17,000 of your Social Security into the tax column that wasn't there before. So now you're paying tax on $37,000 when you took $20,000 out of the IRA. Your taxable income went up by $37,000.
So
because of Social Security taxability.
Yeah. So one of the things you have to consider when you're trying to figure out how much am I going to need to retire is taxes may play a bigger role than you thought.
They may, or you may have overestimated, and you might have more money than you need to, and maybe you didn't have to work as long as you worked.
How accurate? You know how you can go on to my SSA. You can see what you're projected. What you're projected. Have you ever looked to see how accurate those might be?
From what I've seen for people that, now it also depends on how consistent your income is, and also how far away from retirement you are.
Well, let's say you've got 4 or 5 years, and I'm doing that just because this is sort of...
They're pretty close. They're going to be pretty close.
Does this count the Medicare premium? Like, let's say...
Oh, gosh,
let's
no.
say
The
if they say...
is your Social Security benefit.
Well, yeah, exactly. So if you say, well, I'm supposed to get, $2,000 a month at age 65, say, and that's when I'm going to retire, $2,000 a month.
Well, your benefit will be $2,000 a month, but if you sign up for Medicare... I mean, if you're 65 or old and you sign up for Medicare, you got Medicare Part B or Part C, maybe Part D.
We don't know what that's going to be 5 years from now.
We know what it is this year. We're not sure what it is next year yet.
Yeah.
So we can, that's another expense.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you, $2,000 a month, it could be $100.
Could be $200 less.
$220
less
that could be per person
for the Medicare Parts B and D if you have both.
So if you are counting and you say, well, my wife and I both have a $2,000 projected Social Security benefit 3 years from now, but they need to consider that a Medicare premium is going to come out of both of those.
Yeah, and
which could be.
And if you're on Medicare Part B and D, you might want to consider a supplement as well. Usually Medicare Part C doesn't take the supplements, so you got to decide which way you're going to go with Medicare. Depending upon how you're going to run your retirement life.
And what do you think that's going to run somebody in a few years?
What would
it run somebody right now?
Depends on the supplement. My guess is $100
per month, per person.
Yeah, I don't know exactly on that one.
Okay.
Medicare Part B is like just shy of $170. Medicare Part D, which is the drugs, ranges depends on where you live and which drug plan you take, but figure $35 to $50 a month for Medicare Part D.
And again, per person.
And that's assuming you're not in the IRMA levels. Medicare Advantage, also known as Medicare C, is typically just the Medicare B premium. You don't have to pay the D at that point. But Medicare Advantage a lot of times will include prescription, dental, vision, and things like that, which traditional Medicare doesn't cover.
But you can add that on.
That's through the supplements if you
through
have
the
traditional.
Supplements. Correct, yeah.
Yeah. But you pay for that.
Well, yeah, you do. And so, again, I'm coming back to the expenses. If somebody had said, well, between my wife and me, we're going to have $2,000
we're going to
each.
have $4,000.
Well, knock it down by maybe
$300 a person.
It could be.
Yeah, with the supplement and everything in there.
Instead of $4,000 a month, you're going to get $3,400 a month that you hadn't budgeted for.
So these are the things you have to take into consideration. You have to figure out how much you're going to need, how much your incomes are going to be, and what the shortfall is, if any. Yeah. And that shortfall is going to be provided for by distributions from your portfolio, as long as the portfolio exists.
Well, let's assume that it does.
Well, once we've identified the shortfalls, and not just the first year of retirement as we talked about, but further on into retirement, when maybe the maybe the mortgage is paid off or something of that nature, or you have a specific hobby that you plan on doing, and maybe an expensive hobby that you want to do for the next 5 or 10 years, but then you figure by the time you're 70 or 75, you're just not going to do that anymore because it's just too, but you want to do it while you can.
Yeah, sure.
So your expenses are going to drop dramatically in some cases, 10 years from now, 5 years, whenever that hobby goes away.
So you can spend a little more now.
And so we can look at
knowing that
we look at what the portfolio has to provide. And then we can calculate, well, how big does the portfolio have to be today to be able to make this distribution over time?
Yes. Now, you said over time. The last thing I want to bring up on this is longevity, because that you don't know. I mean, you could live to be 99. You could live to be 71. I mean, honestly, anybody, regardless of your health. So
it may not be a health condition that unfortunately takes you down.
now, if you're not healthy, you're probably not going to live to be 99 unless you change your way of life. But how do you factor in, just very quickly, how do you factor in longevity into this? Because you don't know how long it needs to last.
Well, part of it is obviously we're looking at family histories and things of that nature, the current health of the individual, family histories that are different than your own history. We've seen people who say, well, my mom died at 80, dad died at 78, but they were chain smokers. They were this, they were that. So
you can,
and I've taken better care. So I'm hoping to make it further than that. Or my grandmother was 105 and my grandfather was, and everybody in my family, they're long livers. The only thing that an accident is the only thing that could take me out on this. And so you can't plan, hopefully you can't plan on that. And so you're going to have to plan for a little bit longer longevity.
Well, is there a way to take longevity out of the equation, or does everybody have to?
Yeah, have $20 million and only need $5,000 a year. Then longevity doesn't matter. I mean, if you have enough money, at some point, it doesn't matter because you're spending like 1 or 2% of your portfolio a year and you're earning more than that.
I don't want to suggest Buckets does that because it doesn't. But does having a strategy like a Bucket strategy, does that at least temper the potential effects of living long time?
As much as I love the buckets and everything, I don't think that it's going to add longevity, or add the portfolio longevity just because you've bucketized. What it does is it helps you avoid the negative sequences that happen, especially early on, that can have a devastating effect on your portfolio if you do it wrong. Non-buckets. It can help the portfolio last longer, not because it helps avoid the problems.
Yeah.
But that's just a matter
But it's not going to last forever.
But it also depends on,
yeah.
I mean, it's not going to go from, well, you're going to run out of money in 10 years. Oh, but I'm going to bucketize and now I'll have it for 40 years. No, that's not the way it works. I've run lots of different scenarios, with historical returns and all this. And whenever we have bad times, having appropriate buckets plan can help extend a little. It's not going to extend it 10, 20 years, but it can help extend the life of the portfolio because you avoid some of the pitfalls of a down market. That the scariness, the feeling that we have to sell everything when it's down because I don't want to lose any more. And unfortunately, that's where people get into trouble. Or the portfolio's down and they just continue their same balanced approach, but continue taking money out in a down market and it can never recover. You're selling things at a loss. So having a buckets plan can help in the long run. It won't miraculously make your overspending available for the rest of time.
Well, for somebody who says, I'm just going to plan on 30 years, does a bucket strategy... See, I've seen illustrations of buckets that say, you get through the first 15 years and then you tap into your bucket 3, right? Your bucket 3, which started at, $300,000, is now worth...
$1.2 million. A rule of 72.
Yeah, $1.2 million. So 15 years later, I got $1.2 million and I refill all my buckets. I mean, to somebody... just thinking about that, they'd say, well, gosh, it sounds like this is just going to...
It's a perpetual issue.
This is an ongoing... I mean, theoretically, if I lived to be 150, would it still be... It sounds like it's something that would never run out.
That is true if the distribution is reasonable. But
let's assume a reasonable distribution.
Right. So that will help grow the portfolio. That helps you avoid the downturns. It helps you avoid the negativity of the market. But what I'm talking more about is somebody who is in trouble of not lasting.
Well,
having
then
too
that's
high
a
of
whole
a
different thing.
distribution.
Sure, yeah.
And buckets can help some of that, but it's not going to alleviate the whole thing. But what having an appropriate investment strategy does, how do you make money in the stock market? You buy low and sell high. Why is that? Seems so simple, but very few people do it because human emotion. We get in 2021 because the market's looking great, and then we get out in 2022 because the market's not looking so great. We don't buy low and sell high. We do the exact opposite. We buy high and sell low because emotion, fear, and greed are pushing us one way or the other.
The biggest success factor, I think, would be time. Now, this is when you're talking about stocks. Now, speaking of time, we're out of time for this episode. But what you just said, I want to continue this discussion on next week's program because this leads into a second question that we got just a week or so ago discussing buckets, which was, well, how much of my portfolio should I have in stocks once I'm retired? And obviously it depends.
Any answer in financial planning is it depends. And it depends on how much your distribution is and how much you have to take out in the early years. And
yes, and this gets
money I need to distribute next year should not be in a stock portfolio.
Well, we're going to talk about this next time. So I just want to tease this because this is a great second half to this particular discussion.
Okay.
Which comes back to how much you're going to need to retire. And is it really true that the older you get, the lower your stock allocation should be? I mean, if I'm 90, do I really need to have 90% safety or bonds and only 10%? That's that old rule of 100.
Right.
I think is what it was called.
Another general rule.
Well, we're going to get into that next time. My thanks to Professor Rick Plum. If you'd like to get in touch with him or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors, 800-644-1150, number at Lucia Capital Group, 800-644-1150. Give them a call. They think about this stuff all the time. If you need more resources online, you go to luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. Make sure you listen to this podcast, subscribe, listen every single week. I can't guarantee you're going to learn something every time, but over the years, I sure did. LuciaCap.com. Go to Spotify. Spotify. Well, you can also listen at LuciaCap.com, but Spotify and iTunes, you can subscribe. I hope you do that. My thanks to Professor Rick Plum. For him and everybody else, I'm your host, Johnny Dean. We'll talk to you again next week.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Lucia Capital Group or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material is gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Rick Plum and Ara Friedman are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.